Welcome to today's webinar. Again, this is Simone Turek from the John Burton Foundation. This is the bi-monthly THP+, THP+FC call, and thanks for joining us. So we're going to get started. If you're listening through your computer speakers, you have the option to instead call in using a telephone. So I know that we go through this every time, but I just want to bring that to your attention. You are welcome to listen through your computer speakers, but you may get better sound listening through your telephone. So if you need that information, if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a control panel, and there is call-in information there. So you can use your telephone to dial that number and then enter that access code. And then throughout the presentation, we will be accepting questions. We won't take them till the end, but we will be compiling them. So please, if anything comes up through the presentation, you have a question, use that questions box in your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, enter it in, hit send, and we will get to it hopefully during the Q&A. And then we always post the presentation materials, so a copy of the PowerPoint as well as a recording of the audio at www.thp+.org. And I will also send out a copy of the presentation materials to all of you who registered even after the presentation is over. So today we are very excited to be talking about a very important topic, and we are joined by two wonderful people. So first, I'll just reintroduce myself. I'm Simone Turek. I'm the Associate Policy Director with the John Burton Foundation, and I'm joined by Sean Mainville. He's the Associate Governmental Policy Analyst with California Department of Social Services. He works in the CalFresh Policy Bureau, which is part of the CalFresh branch of the Welfare to Work Division. That is a mouthful, and I asked him very specifically. I wanted to make sure I got that correct. I hope I did. And Liz Aliman, she is the dependency attorney with East Bay Children's Law Offices. We call them EBCLO. EBCLO represents almost all of the dependents in Alameda County, and Liz is the staff attorney who oversees the AB12 project. So we very much appreciate both Sean and Liz for being on the call today. Thanks to both of you. So we are going to talk about an important issue today, and a really important resource for youth participating in extended foster care, and that's food stamps, or CalFresh. And I'll just really briefly review this for folks who may be unfamiliar. CalFresh is what California calls its Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It's what we've been calling CalFresh food stamps for many years, so many of you are familiar with the term food stamps. And this is government assistance to add to a household's food budget. And you can apply for CalFresh as a household and receive assistance with purchasing food for your household. And Sean will get more into all of this information later. But I just would like to really provide an overview of, why are we talking about this today in regards to non-minor dependents. So first, just to back up a little bit, who are non-minor dependents. Non-minor dependents are foster youth that are non-minors. So these are youth who are participating in extended foster care. Extended foster care was implemented 4 years ago now, in 2012. It was established by Assembly Bill 12, the California Fostering Connections to Success Act, which passed in 2010. And we know this, this has been just a huge endeavor for our state, and it's what we learned from a report that came out just day before yesterday. Extended foster care is actually really helping the youth who are participating in it. So we didn't plan this, but somehow in a really timely manner, Chapin Hall released the findings from their Cal Youth Study, Conditions at Age 19, on Tuesday. And, there was data in there on CalFresh utilization. So again, didn't plan this, but very, very timely. So, prior to the release of this information, we knew anecdotally that non-minor dependents, weren't fully accessing this benefit as much as they could have been and maybe needed to. But now we can really look at the numbers. And so the Cal Youth study tells us that, you know, about a third of non-minor dependents age 19 reported having ever received CalFresh. And then, more importantly, 4 in 5 were not currently receiving CalFresh at the time that they were interviewed for this research. And so this pulls from, just to give a frame of reference, this pulls from a sample of almost 600 youth participating in extended foster care. And we also learned that youth in care were significantly less likely than youth who exited care to have ever received CalFresh. So that just gives us a little bit of information about, you know, how many youth in extended foster care are accessing CalFresh benefits. We also learned from the findings of the Cal Youth study, conditions at age 19, that, you know, we learned about employment and wages. We learned that, you know, 2/3 were not employed at the time of their interview. And of that third that was employed, more were employed part-time. So this is a, you know, a huge indicator of why non-minor dependents should probably be accessing CalFresh to supplement their monthly budget. You know, look at the hourly wage, the average hourly wage for those who are working. It's just barely above our state's minimum wage. So we know that, you know, non-minor dependents, we know that transition age youth in general don't make a lot of money. So then you look at youth who are, you know, foster youth, and you know that there is a need there. And we also, you know, I'd be remiss to not mention the rate of pregnancy and parenting that exists for this population, which makes food security and access to healthy food, you know, even more important. According also to the Cal Youth study, you know, 49% of the females in the study had ever been pregnant by age 19, and 26% had given birth to a child by 19. So, you know, there are not only non-minor dependents that could benefit from this, but there are dependents of those non-minor dependents that, you know, their own children who can benefit from this resource. And so the purpose of this call is we want to help everyone who works with non-minor dependents get clear on CalFresh eligibility so that youth are able to access these benefits that need them. So we started talking about a little bit about foster care. Now what I'd like to do is shift over to Sean Mainville, again with CDSS, who works for the CalFresh Policy Bureau. And he's going to delve into CalFresh sort of broadly to help us get clear on the benefits. And then what we'll do is kind of dive back into foster care and apply that information to our non-minor dependents. So Sean, I'm now passing it over to you.
Thanks, Simone, and you nailed both my job title as well as where I work perfectly, so
Perfect.
Thank you for getting all of those governmental organizations straight. I wanted to step back just a little bit and kind of talk about the program, the CalFresh program, formerly known as food stamps, known nationally as SNAP. In California, our program is administered at a county level, which means that the state has an oversight function. So that's done in 2 ways, through our field operations half of the CalFresh branch here at the Department of Social Services, which is under the umbrella of the Welfare to Work Division, to throw in another level of bureaucracy. And that field operations has both quality control reviews, which are reviews of individual cases, as well as management evaluation reviews, which look at overall county operations. And so the counties are really the ones that are administering the program. I work in the Policy Bureau, as you talked about, so work with the legislator and others within the department to develop new policy, to clarify existing policy. So as I speak today, I don't want to undermine the credibility of the information that I'm providing. Nonetheless, it is really the county level that is making these eligibility determinations. So I'm kind of trying to speak globally and generally, and to a crowd that is looking at it, I understand, very specifically on a case-by-case basis. So that being said, to this slide, does the being in foster care impact eligibility for CalFresh benefits? There is no direct correlation. Eligibility should be made on a case-by-case basis. looking at the household circumstances and following a budget computation, which is all computerized at this point and within the computer systems, formerly done with a hand budget. But there are eligibility factors besides the budget, such as student factors, that we'll be looking at. Student status. Ready for the next slide. So one of the things that is most important when considering eligibility is income to the household. And the gross income or gross test is the initial hurdle, which considers all income being allotted to the household or coming into the household, both earned and unearned. Current standards have it at 200% of the federal poverty level. Moving ahead, and then the net income test is done further down the line for those that pass the initial hurdle in order to determine benefit level. Here we can see a rough guide or the guide of the 200% of the federal poverty level currently. Again, and for the different household sizes. Yeah, that's all I have on this slide. Thank you for the next one. So the net income is the result after doing a budget computation, and the budget computation we'll see in a future slide takes into account different deductions. And this is really the number that will be taken to a table in order to determine benefit level, and is based on the 100% of the federal poverty level. Let's take a look at those deductions in order to determine the net income. So there's a 20% earned income deduction right off the top. So Simone's talking about the wages that are earned. Of those, 20% is deducted off the top. As well, there's a standard deduction, which everybody would qualify for. And I want to mention the bolded standard utility allowance. This is an important distinction when considering how foster benefits are distributed. If it is possible for the household to pay a utility directly, counties are more likely to allow this specific deduction in order to maximize the benefits for the household. Oftentimes, or it might be another possibility where rent and utility are combined, and I think it's a better strategy to employ to have those delineated out, to have them separated in order to maximize the deductions. As well, it's bulleted here that 100% of dependent care costs are allowed as a deduction. The medical deduction, which is noted at the very bottom, is only allowed for houses that contain an elderly or disabled member. Ready for the next slide. There's certain kinds of income that aren't counted, and here we want to spend a little bit of time talking about in-kind benefits and vendor payments, which are two strategies that I believe are utilized in counties that as a best practice in order to maximize eligibility for the non-minor dependent population. In-kind benefits here noted parenthetically, items such as meals, clothing, housing provided specifically by an employer. I think more typically this might be benefits that are distributed perhaps via gift cards or items that are provided to the household directly. And the next option is the vendor payments, which is money that's paid to a third party for household expense. So this would be an example where a rent is paid directly on behalf of the youth without the money being distributed and thus counted as income to the household. If the entire rent is paid, then in the budget calculation there would not be an allowance for the household expense, which is certainly a trade-off. But if the trade-off is that by distributing the money as income to the household, they would then be over the income limit, it is a better strategy to pay the rent as a vendor payment and attain some level of benefits for the household.
So Sean, I'm just going to pop in here real quick.
Sure, please.
And I want to just kind of hone in on this for a second, because this I think is an important distinction that you're making. What you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that for a provider, say what we call a THP+FC placement, if a provider is, there's two ways they can do things maybe, right? There's either they're giving youth a larger direct payment and then expecting the youth to cover their rent, to pay their own rent, or they're covering the youth's rent for them, by paying directly from the provider to the, the landlord,
right,
and passing less money to the youth. What you're saying is for the purpose of CalFresh eligibility, you'd be more likely to be eligible in a scenario where the stipend is smaller that's going to the youth and the rent is being paid directly. Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to blanketly say more likely, but okay, there are certainly instances where that's going to be the case.
Okay.
And the county should absolutely be willing to take a look at the numbers, work with the household, and understand where exactly the best case scenario breaks out. So if they're, if making the entire allotment available to the household, distributing the larger amount to the youth would make them ineligible to CalFresh benefits, then it seems like a likely strategy to employ to make the rent paid directly as a vendor payment and at least attain some CalFresh benefits.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying. There is a provision for cash donations, which is from a charitable organization, $300 in a calendar quarter, and a small income received too infrequently to be reasonably anticipated provision in the regulations. We're ready for that next slide. So I understand that these youth being in different living circumstances may present some challenges as far as to think about how benefits are calculated for CalFresh purposes. And for CalFresh, the CalFresh program, we talk about purchase and preparing and household members. So CalFresh has been granted to households, and that is a group of people that live together who regularly purchase and prepare their meals together. Again, benefit determinations are made within individual counties, but nonetheless, everybody should have an enlightened view of purchase and prepare, this notion that people can live together, but in fact purchase and prepare separately. That may include inquiries into perhaps segmenting food storage, right? Somebody has half the refrigerator, or there may be questions along those lines. But nonetheless, there should be made the accommodation for this idea of separate households living within the same residence. One important factor to consider in CalFresh eligibility is being a student. Does being a student affect CalFresh eligibility? Yes, absolutely. There are generally students are not eligible to the program with a growing list of exemptions. There's been recent work, a bill passed a couple years ago, AB 1930, that really wanted to focus on making more of this population, that is students who are attending school, eligible to CalFresh benefits. So let's take a look at some of those exemptions. So generally the first way to be exempt is by maintaining employment for a minimum of 20 hours per week. This is not 20 hours every week, but an average, and the counties should be relatively familiar with considering the averaged hours of employment as a way to exempt students and make them eligible to CalFresh benefits. As well, there's work study. Anybody that is employed as part of work study, that is work that is done at the school as part of the financial aid package, are eligible to CalFresh benefits. The regulations speak to anticipating to work, being approved for, and anticipating to work in work study. There's a little bit of contention among some of our advocate population as far as what this really means. If any student that once approved can reasonably anticipate or can anticipate working, there should be clarifying guidance that is issued around this point in the coming year. Nonetheless, work study is another possibility for an exemption of a student. Again, the final 3 points here, parents, children. There's several provisions which make them eligible to CalFresh. Take a look at the next slide. So there's certain student eligibility requirements that do not apply to certain categories of students. That is, these students do not need to meet one of the exclusions that was previously discussed. Those who are unfit for employment, high school students perhaps that are continuing their high school education past the age of 18, yeah, here's some enrolled in higher education institutions less than half-time. So these students would not have to worry about meeting one of the exclusions previously mentioned. Take a look at the next slide. Within California and across the nation, within the SNAP program as a whole, there are certain work requirements as part of the Great Recession since around 2008 or 9. Large portions, and indeed I think the entire country, has been under waivers, that these work provisions for the CalFresh program have not been in effect. As the economy recovers, these waivers are slowly rolling off across the country. California is under a waiver until the end of calendar year 2017, that is December 31st, 2017. So we're going to talk about, in the next couple of slides, some work requirements, and please realize that these work requirements themselves are not currently in place. The work registration requirement, that is that when somebody comes in and applies for benefits, there should be an automatic behind-the-scenes registration for work services or job placement that should be occurring within the county if the applicant is unemployed or underemployed. So what are the work requirements? Again, talking about after 2017, there will be a certain number of hours that will be required to work within a month, and a certain number of months of eligibility or periods of eligibility within a calendar year every 12 months. And
John,
further,
do you want me to go, sorry, do you want me to go to the slide about who's exempt from these work requirements, or do you want to stay here?
No, let's jump ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to kind of speak over these slides. Generally, yeah, thank you very much. So,
sorry, I know it's a lot of info.
it is. There's a lot crammed in there. And to be fair, not only is our the statewide waiver good through 2017, but we're between now and that time, we will be kind of rethinking the way we've dealt with this in the past. For and specifically, we're talking about the population that is most impacted is the adult able-bodied adults without dependents, or the ABOD population, which the non-minor dependents may be especially falling into this category. So not only do we have a waiver that's in place and rolling off at the end of 2017, but we're rethinking the way that we're going to, this population is going to receive CalFresh benefits and how the time clocks, statewide time clocks for the ABODs will be calculated. Maybe we'll go ahead and take a look at the next slide. So generally, going back to overall eligibility for CalFresh, and specifically those who are not eligible to receive CalFresh benefits, there are certain citizenship and requirements that are mandatory for the program. Anybody that receives SSI specifically is not eligible to receive CalFresh benefits. California is the last state to have a cash out option, which means there's a supplement that is attached to an SSI benefit, which then renders that population ineligible to CalFresh. As well, there's some additional populations here, people that don't comply with their work requirements, as well as a group of fleeing felons, those that are fleeing from law enforcement with a felony warrant. Take a look at that next slide. These are the maximum monthly allotments. Again, the final budget calculation, the net income calculation, is what is used to determine benefit amount. But this table gives you a rough idea of the maximum amount of benefits for household sizes 1 through 8. We'll take a look at the application process. Increasingly, applications are being made through the online portal that is noted here, benefitscal.org. There are certainly paper applications that are made available in every office, county welfare department office throughout the state. There is a CalFresh only application if somebody is going into an office to apply only for CalFresh benefits. Nonetheless, increasingly county operations are built around the online portals, and I think that this targeted population would be most comfortable submitting their information via an online portal. There are tools available there to upload verifications such as images of a driver's license, identification, perhaps wage stubs or rent receipts. An interview is mandatory with application process. Increasingly, that's done by phone, and then a notification of eligibility or denial of benefits will be mailed to the applicant. So in California, the timeline for receiving benefits, or nationally actually, is for regular processing, processing of a regular application is 30 days. It's expected that the application will be processed before that time frame. Within California, For those under certain circumstances, which are listed there in the bottom of the slide, there are expedited service benefits which are made available, and that is regular CalFresh benefits, but just made available in a much quicker timeline. The processing for expedited service benefits is within 3 calendar days within California. Every applicant should be provided information about applying for expedited service, and the county should indeed be reviewing the circumstances on the application to ensure that anybody that is eligible to expedited service does indeed receive them, that is, receive benefits within the expedited service timeline. Take a look at the next slide. So here we just wanted to speak to the differences between the income types for determining eligibility. Again, earned income, those are wages from employment, while the unearned income is the stipend or payment or benefits received. And here we want to make the distinction that there are benefits that are actually received by the household. Again, earlier we talked about vendor payments. The vendor payment is one way to reduce the amount of overall unearned income that is made available to the household. And there have been reports that some counties want to count an entire benefit amount.
Foster care payment.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, entire foster care payment is, I think, the
Yes,
wording
thank you very much. That's the language I'm looking for. Thank you. An entire foster care payment. So including all monies that are allotted for that particular youth to count as unearned income, which I think is a departure from the regulations. And we often speak about considering only those funds that are made available directly to the household as unearned income.
Thank you, Sean. That's a really important distinction. And I honestly kind of think if you only take one thing away from this call today, that might be the one thing. For non-minor dependents, that's, I think, been one of the most confusing pieces of CalFresh, the CalFresh application process. For those who are assisting with, assisting youth in applying, and for youth themselves, there's just been some confusion about whether they're even eligible, what's the unearned income, and so we're really hoping that this answers that question.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for making that distinction, and hopefully that will clear up some confusion. And what we want to do to kind of further operationalize this information is just apply that placement by placement. And so I'm going to just run through. We're just going to talk about. We're going to talk about 3 types of placements. We've kind of combined, a foster home / caregiver, relative caregiver into one type of home, and then, the SILP, the Supervised Independent Living Placement, as another, and then THP+FC, so the Transitional Housing Foster Care Placement, as kind of the 3 types of placements that we are going to look at. And we're receiving, I've received a number of questions already about placement-specific questions, and so I think what will happen now is we'll probably just answer those right now and going over those slides. But if there's still any confusion, we can address those questions again during Q&A. So I'm going to try to breeze through these without going too quickly, but I do want to leave Q&A time. So let's start with the Supervised Independent Living Placement. There are many non-minor dependents placed in what we call SILPs. This is, I would say, maybe, one of the simpler placements to apply the rule to, because many youth in SILPs actually do receive their entire foster care payment directly. So, right now the current foster care rate for a SILP is $859. So if youth are receiving that $859, that is their unearned income. So this is not a placement where there's a provider receiving a full rate and then they're portioning out a piece of it to the youth, a stipend to the youth. This is actually the full, the SILP is equal to the basic rate, and so they're getting that rate directly. Now, if a youth is a parent and they're receiving, or they're a custodial parent and they're receiving the infant supplement, that's $411 currently, and so that would also be included in unearned income, as would be the additional $200 if they're receiving that supplement, that newer supplement that you can get for having a parenting support plan in place. And so this is, all individualized depending on what what the youth's situation is. And then, as with anyone, the earned income is always, what you earn from wages and salaries. Now, Sean did make a distinction about receiving the money directly, and I think there is one piece, and we did get this in the Q&A. I knew we would, and we did get it, so I'll probably just maybe address it now, and then if it needs to be further hashed out, Sean, chime in. But there's some youth who don't receive their SILP payment directly. Sometimes it goes to a payee, but I wanted to distinguish. There's a difference between it going to a payee and going to a vendor. So if a SILP payment is going to a landlord, that is a vendor payment. But if a SILP payment is going to a payee, and that money is ultimately directly available to the youth, that is their unearned income. Sean, am I explaining that correctly?
That's my understanding and thinking through it now, and the little bit of research I did looking at the regulations, but I certainly want to follow up and do a little more delving. I know there's other instances where payees are used apart from this specific population that we're talking about, and so I will research and look at the policy guidance that was issued around payees in those instances and make sure that we're telling everybody correctly.
Great, and we'll continue to be in touch with all of you as we keep talking about CalFresh, and we will likely disseminate something as well with additional information, and the state's also working on getting some documents out to clarify things for non-minor dependents. So we will be in touch about some of these issues moving forward. So THP+FC, so the transitional housing placement, this particular placement is, I think, where some of the more of the confusion has been. And as Sean so wonderfully clarified, the unearned income that should be indicated on the application for a non-minor dependent in THP+FC should not be that $3,000, I think it's $3,001 right now that the THP+FC rate is for the remote site and single site. That should not be the unearned income indicated. You shouldn't be putting $3,000 down, right? That's not what the youth is receiving. That is what the provider receives to provide services and housing. And so the thing that can be tricky here is that providers, there's no standardized living stipend that youth get in THP+FC. It ranges depending on who the youth is placed with. If they're placed with one particular organization, it may be $400 a month or $500 a month the youth receives directly from that organization, from that provider. With other organizations, with other providers, it could be $1,000 a month. So this ranges, and it ranges for a number of reasons, and one being that there are different programmatic kind of practices about what that youth is expected to pay on their own and what is paid on their behalf. And so there's nothing, in regulations that requires a certain living stipend be paid to youth in THP+FC from the organization. That's, like I said, it varies. So just the one thing really to take away from this is that when you are applying for CalFresh as a youth, or when you're assisting a youth in applying, the unearned income should be the amount that the youth receives directly. And then again, the earned income is, money from wages and salaries. So I am going to move on to the foster home, relative caregiver, or guardian. So any kind of, the family home concept, right? A foster home. So in this scenario, the foster homes have been getting CalFresh benefits since, obviously before AB 12 was in place, because children have been in foster homes for many years. Minor children have been. So there are things in the CalFresh regulations that point to how to count income for foster homes. And if you're looking at a foster home that's receiving the basic rate, the $859, it's safe to say that that is the unearned income of that foster home. The key thing here is that in this case, the non-minor dependent is not applying as the head of household, because the foster parent here is the head of household. So they are counted as part of this household. They're a household member. And so because they are non-minors, if they are earning wages, those wages would likely be counted as earned income of the household. So in this scenario, people may be assisting foster parents in applying for CalFresh benefits when there are NMDs in the home. And so, Sean, I don't know if you want to kind of add to what I'm saying at all, but I think the basic takeaway is that the NMD is not applying as the head of household. They're applying as as part of the household is applying.
Correct. And I'll go one step further, perhaps, and say that there are certain rules as far as who is mandatorily within the same household. And I think typically that for foster households in this circumstance, you're applying as one unit, an entire household where everybody purchases and prepares together, and the entire circumstances of the household are considered to make the eligibility determination for CalFresh benefits.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to now just move on forward. Let's see, it's 10:45. What we're going to do at this point is we are going to go through a few scenarios. We've dived back into foster care, kind of from general CalFresh, and now we're ready to apply the rules kind of that Sean has outlined. And so at this point, what I want to do is turn it over to Liz Aliman, and she is going to briskly review some actual hypothetical scenarios for us to help us really continue to operationalize these rules.
Okay, let's get to it, and we'll be quick, and feel free to type in questions as we go. So scenario 1, Lena is an NMD living in a THP+FC placement, and the program pays for her rent and utilities, but she receives a $400 per month stipend to cover her living expenses, and she also gets $250 to care for her child, which probably comes from additional money the program is receiving because she has a child. Okay, so she goes to community college part-time and works 15 hours a week, makes $480, and she shares an apartment with another NMD who's a parent, and that parent's already receiving CalFresh. So it's important to note that in this scenario, she and her roommate mom are buying groceries and making meals separately. So is she eligible? She is eligible. She is a half-time student, but she falls under that exception where she has a child under the age of 6. So the fact that she's a student does not make her ineligible. And then the fact that her roommate already has CalFresh also doesn't affect her eligibility because they prepare meals separately. And then her unearned income from the money, the stipend that she gets from her housing provider is, like I said, considered unearned, so it doesn't count against her income. And then, but her earned income would be the wages that she gets from her job, which we said was $480. All right, next one. Miles is an NMD who is in a SILP at his uncle's house. So that means that he's getting the foster care benefits check directly to himself. However, he lives in a house with his uncle and his uncle's girlfriend and her mom. So the uncle's girlfriend receives CalFresh, but he rarely eats with them, and they don't cook meals together. So, and he doesn't pay rent to his uncle, but he does pay for the household gas bill. So hypothetically, Miles' uncle lets him pocket the SILT money, but he does have to pay for the gas bill. He's still in high school. He's 18, and he does have a part-time job after school that earns $520 a month. And then, like we mentioned, he earns the SILT, or he receives the SILT check each month. So is he eligible for CalFresh? He is eligible because while he does live in a household of someone else receiving CalFresh, he's not counted as a household member under the uncle's girlfriend's CalFresh because he does not purchase and prepare food with her or with the rest of the household. His SILT money is considered unearned income. His earned income would be his part-time job money, so that does count as earned income. And he should use the standard utility deduction because he pays the gas bill. All right. Okay, Mandy is another NMD living in another THP+FC placement. However, she receives a great deal more than Lena, our other hypo. She receives $1,200 a month from her housing provider. So this is quite a bit larger of a stipend. And with that money, she's expected to pay the rent of where she lives. So it's possible that with this type of placement, instead of the program itself renting the apartment and kind of pseudo subleasing to the NMD, this NMD is renting her own apartment but gets a stipend from a program to help pay. There's just sort of a different model. She also works full-time and makes $1,280 a month. She does not have a roommate. Oh, I'm sorry, she does have a roommate, but they have different schedules, so they do not buy food or make food together. Okay, is she eligible? Okay, so the answer is that she is beyond the income threshold because of her gross income. Her unearned income should be what the THP Plus provider gives her directly, the $1,200, but her earned income is what she makes in her full-time job, which is $1,280, which puts her over the gross income threshold, so she would not be eligible. Okay. Jackson is an NMD who lives with his grandma. She is an approved caregiver to him and his two younger siblings. They're all in care, and the younger siblings also live there. And his grandmother is 65 years old and retired, and she does not receive CalFresh. Jackson attends a vocational training program at a community college part-time and also works part-time. So Jackson is not eligible for CalFresh as head of the household, but his grandma can apply and count him and his siblings as members of the household. The grandma should count Jackson's part-time job wages as earned income for the household, and but she should not count, or her foster care benefit check that she gets to take care of her 3 grandkids should not be counted, and it should be considered unearned income. So the household can be eligible, but not Jackson directly. Okay, final hypo. Genevieve is a NMD renting a room from a family friend, also a SILT placement, so she receives $859 foster care benefit directly. She attends a community college full-time and plans to transfer to a 4-year. She's receiving the Chafee grant, special for foster youth in California, and she's approved for work study, but she's overwhelmed with her classes and doesn't plan to work even though she's approved. She does keep her groceries separate and eats mostly on campus. So Genevieve is not eligible for CalFresh because she attends school at least half-time and she does not plan to work. And if you recall, there's that rule about if you go to school at least half-time, you have to work in order to be eligible for CalFresh. So if she decides to work and apply for CalFresh, her SILT check would be considered unearned income. but any money she makes would be considered earned income. And just to clarify, her Chafee grant would not be counted because it is exempt. All right.
Thank you so much, Liz, for kind of breezing through those. And
yes,
I should have
fast. I know.
No. That's great because we have now 7 minutes for Q&A, or actually we're not completely finished. I have another minute or so that I have to focus on something, but then we will turn to Q&A. But I want to quickly say, Liz, as a dependency attorney for youth that are in extended foster care, comes across these scenarios a lot, and so it was really helpful. Liz, thank you for coming on and kind of delving into these. So just real quickly, this is where we both, this is the sources of where we got our information, and also resources for you. And I just want to say the very last one is the Chapin Hall study that just came out Tuesday from the Cal Youth study, the conditions of youth at age 19. So if you want to look at that, but of course, we'll be highlighting it in an upcoming newsletter, as I'm sure you have already guessed. If you're not signed up for our listserv to receive those newsletters, you can do that at www.johnburtonfoundation.org. The rest of the sources on there, or resources on there, are CalFresh specific. And I want to say thanks to Sean for putting me up on this website. Legal Services of Northern California Guide to CalFresh Benefits was a really great resource. Very quickly, policy update. For the purpose of time, I will not go into depth here. I will just say these are two bills that John Burton Foundation is sponsoring. They are both placed on suspense and appropriations. They are both wonderful pieces of legislation. One of them would make the Chafee grant an entitlement for you to apply by September 2nd, and would prohibit the use of Chafee at schools that don't maintain certain requirements. This is a strategy, the prohibition strategy, that we've used for the Cal grant now in this state, and it's been effective in getting schools to comply with certain, to bring their standards up. And obviously, more importantly, making sure that all eligible students who are foster youth who are eligible for Chafee get it is just, I can't go into, even in the time we have, how important that would be, how wonderful that would be. Assembly Bill 1838 would increase the infant supplement. It's right now at $411 a month. It would bring it to the basic rate that we pay foster families to care for foster youth, so that's common sense. And it would also start the receipt of the infant supplement prior to the due date of the child, and would develop a new rate for group homes in THP+FC. I will be sending an email out to everyone after this presentation with a copy of the presentation, and also with templates for support letters, sample support letters that you can submit with instructions of where to submit them. Questions. So I have received several questions. I am going to pick some that I think are most that came up most commonly. So one is one question is, how does a student become considered mentally unfit for employment? So Sean, I think that would be a question for you. And if we can't answer these, that's fine. We can get back to people at a later date.
Yeah, I want to research, I want to make sure I'm giving 100% correct information, but there should have been some sort of determination or documentation that the county is familiar with receiving in regards to that. I will follow up and look for more specific answer.
Great, thanks. And some of these answers might be that, not to say that this is the answer to that question, but might be that this is a county question. It might be something for a particular county. So we can also look into that and see what counties tend to do. Another question is, would a non-minor dependent living in a foster home somehow have to prove or demonstrate that they purchase or prepare their food separate from the foster parents in order to, apply as head of household, I think is what this person is asking.
So there's kind of two questions there. If there's foster parents, I think there's specific rules regarding how those, whether or not they are all together in one CalFresh household. The purchase and prepare question, it should just be a question to the applicant, do you purchase or prepare separately or together? There should not be any required verification on that point.
And Sean, am I right in understanding that for a SILP or a THP+FC placement, these are scenarios where they are more likely to be roommates that have separate households, but in a foster home situation, it is more likely to probably that's one household is my guess. Is that?
I would agree with that, yeah.
Okay. And then the other question is, what does it mean to register for work? How would one do this?
It should be something that's done by the county. I would assume a lot of times that it's done largely behind the scenes. It may require a few additional questions at application.
Okay. And is financial aid in the form of grants and/or loans considered income for CalFresh?
I breezed past that on one of the slides. It is not considered income. Any loan is not income, and as well, educational grants are not.
Great. Okay. Is unearned income income that will not count against them when applying for CalFresh? I think this is a great distinction for you to make, kind of explaining what this about, kind of going back to what is unearned and what is earned income and what that means.
Right, absolutely. They both count in the eligibility determination and both in the gross and net test. The difference being the earned income has a percentage disregard, a 20% disregard, whereas earned income will count in full towards the eligibility determination.
Thanks. Okay. This is a great point, and this is something that I think probably when I was going over the slide, I just wasn't specific enough. It says use of the earnings of a minor child living in a foster home would generally count as income. So that's actually not, and it says actually if a foster child is a minor and part of the foster parent's household, their earned income is usually exempt. That is correct. No, minor foster children, that is different. I'm referring to non-minor foster children. So under 18, if you have a high school student working, Sean, am I correct that that income is not going to be counted towards that foster home?
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay, and if a non-minor dependent is receiving WIC, will that affect their CalFresh eligibility?
WIC does not affect CalFresh eligibility.
Okay. Does financial aid count as income? We already answered that. No. Just trying to see if there's any kind of that are popping up several times. Again, I will be sending a copy of the presentation. I am getting that question. I thought there was a new law saying that youth in college can get CalFresh if they participate in EOPS on campus. Can you please advise on this? So Sean, I know you mentioned a law that passes. Is there any more info that you want to provide about that?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have the letter numbers in front of me, but the EOPS is one of the eligible exemptions to make a student eligible. That bill was AB 1930, and they are working to expand the list of eligible programs that would make a student eligible to the CalFresh.
Great. So we will look more into that, and we can also disseminate some information about that because knowing about EOPS would be great. Here's a good question because this is what this was the takeaway, right? This is one of the major takeaways. It says that this person says they were trained that all THP+FC placements made our youth ineligible for CalFresh. I missed the beginning of the presentation, so I apologize if you answer, but does it actually depend on the stipend allotted? So we know that, yes, it depends on the stipend allotted. THP+FC does not make youth ineligible. Sean, do you want to say anything more on that?
Yeah, I want to say that it neither makes them ineligible nor does receiving that benefit make them implicitly eligible to benefits. There has been a misconception that perhaps there's some sort of categorical eligibility that is an automatic eligibility to CalFresh benefits simply because they receive that THP plus that benefit.
Great. Thank you so much. So we are now at 11:02. I want to respect people's time and close out, but we do have additional questions. What I will try to do is compile them and put out some sort of document at a later date addressing many of those questions. And I want to just thank everyone for attending. Thank you, Sean and Liz, for being speakers on this call. This was an important topic. I want to remind everyone that our next call is July 14th, so we'll be reaching out about that closer to the date. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you.
Thanks.